Hello friends, fellow modelers, and hobby enthusiasts. Welcome back to the third episode in this speed painting series, where I'll be working on every miniature from the Lovecraftian horror exploration board game, The Mansions of Madness. In this video, we're going to go over painting and the basing steps for the menacing, amphibious, fish-like humanoids, the deep ones. There are 4 of these total, included with the second edition of the game, so the plan will be to paint them all the same color scheme, with slight variation on the bases. The goal of this series is to show you how to get quickly and nicely painted miniatures onto the tabletop for your board games with a few simple steps and supplies. If you're following along for the first time as a reference for your own set of minis for this game, feel free to check out the 2 previous episodes. It's always great to have painted miniatures versus unpainted. I find that it enhances the experience, so without further ado, let's slay the gray, push some pigment, and continue increasing immersion for board game nights. Like any miniature or model, we'll have to get the miniature ready for paint. I already mentioned this in the previous videos, but the minis in this game have some really annoying mold lines running through the sculpts that, to be quite honest, I just don't feel is worth the effort in removing. This is our family's board game, so I'm okay with removing the mold lines, not only for time's sake, but the soft and spongy plastic is quite difficult to sand. The deep ones, like all the other models, come attached and pre-glued to the square bases, with all the enemy types having special data cards that slot in for quick reference during gameplay. I start by first separating the mini from the base with a sharp hobby knife, and then drill holes underneath where the old attachment points were. Brass rods are then inserted with a touch of CA glue and accelerator. These will be easy to remove later on. These are then staked into wine corks, which are fixed to wood blocks with double-sided tape for comfortable handling and painting. This should make reaching all the undersides with the paintbrush much easier. After getting all 4 ready, it's ready for handling. The first step, as always, is to lay down a good foundation with primer. To start off, I airbrushed Badger Stynylrez Res black primer thinned down with UMP acrylic thinner. As soon as the black primer was dry, I followed with a few mist coats of Tamiya X2 white from a distance, aiming for only the most top areas. The idea is to leave some black to keep some darkness in the recess areas and undersides. The light coats of white help create a smooth gradient between the light and dark areas of the mini. It's not a zenithal highlight, but I like to call it a pre-highlight. Doing this step helps boost the contrast in the finished product. Once I had all 4 deep ones nicely primed and highlighted, it's time to lay down the main colors. The color scheme on the art of the data card depicts a more pale pink and magenta creature. Pretty horrific, but I decided to go with my own color scheme and make them blue. Think of the Zoras from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but they are more hostile and eat people. Anyways, to start off things, I made a mixture of Citadel Ethermatic Blue, Talisar Blue, and Contrast Medium to create my Ocean Blue custom contrast wash. I apply this mixture all over each miniature. It's important to get nice and even coverage and not let paint pool up too much in one spot. I keep the brush moving and try not to disturb any areas I've already gone over to avoid any tearing or pooling of the paint layer. It's also important to keep the brush nicely loaded to keep working smoothly as we work the contrast paint around. After getting all the deep ones covered nicely with the blue and ample time to dry, I began layering in the finer details. Next, I carefully base coated the eyes with Citadel Corvus Black using the point of my brush. Following by layering Citadel Pink Horror on the inside of the mouths. And Screaming Skull over all the claws and teeth. To break up some of the blue areas and add some variation, I created a diluted mixture of Citadel Doomfire Magenta and distilled water to create a less intense magenta wash, which I then applied to all the webbing and exposed fins of the creatures. I really liked the way it complemented the blue skin. After applying the wash and giving the minis time to dry, this is a good point to double check for any neatness and to touch up any colors that I already did, so I did just that. Feeling satisfied with my touch-ups, I applied a dark blue wash of Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade on all the blue skin to darken the recesses. This will also tint the skin a slightly darker blue. Continuing with washes, I applied a layer of Citadel Agrax Earthshade on all the teeth and claws. Same concept, darkens the recesses and tints the overall color a bit darker. To restore back some brightness and bring back some highlights, I did a pass of dry brushing over all the blue skin with a much lighter blue. In this case, I used Vallejo model color Sky Blue. I prefer a softer dry brush with shorter bristles for this to create a less harsh edge compared to a stiff bristle brush. Cheap makeup eyeshadow brushes work well for this. After feeling satisfied with the blue, I added a small dot of Citadel Corax White to finish off the uncanny reflection in the deep black dead fish eyes. Following this, I did have to come back with a little bit of sky blue to clean up some of the skin areas where I needed to do some refining of the highlights. To finish off the deep ones, I add a little bit of blood splatter to the teeth and claws by stippling on some more Doomfire Magenta. With that step, the paint job is done. But of course, that means it's time to create some fun bases for these ghastly fishy fellas. Like in the previous episode, I'm going to create some water-themed bases. I started by covering each base with my favorite method of covering each base with super glue and cat litter. Yeah, inexpensive, quick, and durable way of getting these bases quickly textured. I make sure with these square bases to clean any rough edges with the hobby knife before proceeding. I was inspired to try a new way of creating water texture that I saw in a ship modeling video recently. I start by applying small pieces of wet tissue paper on one side of each base. Mod Podge matte and a little bit of water is brushed over to help seal in the water and wet tissue. Straight away I found that I was not liking how the water texture was turning out, and this took ages to dry. The texture also didn't seem convincing, so I tried mixing some baking soda with some Mod Podge matte and the water to maybe create a more convincing texture, but I also wasn't sold on that look either. I must be doing something terribly wrong, and so ultimately, I decided to let everything dry completely and apply a thin layer of super glue and accelerator to each water area on the bases. This sealed in and hardened all the baking soda and paper, and I call that good for now. So After having some time to rethink how to fix my mess, I decided to first apply a layer of Citadel Astral Granite over each base to kind of give me a fresh start. With that layer, I began painting in the water areas with a custom sea green color unmixed. This is just Mod Podge Matte Citadel Wog Flesh and a bit of Leviathan Blue. I don't really have an exact ratio and just did this on the fly. I found this to be a nice dark ocean green to serve as a base for the water portions. For the non-water areas, I applied a layer of Citadel Dawnstone. Once those areas had dried completely, I started by glazing a layer of Citadel Talisar Blue to the water. The sea green layer underneath pokes through and helps the water have a sense of depth. To bring in some highlights to the water, I followed a dry brush application of Vallejo Model Color Sky Blue over all the raised areas of the water portions. Afterwards, I carefully stippled and dry brushed a thin messy line of Citadel Corax White over where the water meets the rocks to create the impression of foam and bubbles from the water being disturbed by the creature emerging from the depths for when I fix them into place. Citadel Seraphim Sepia was then glazed carefully over all the shore and rocks to bring the color temperature back to warm. Once Seraphim Sepia completely dried off, I did a heavy dry brush application of Citadel Screaming Skull to give the rocky shore the final highlights and its warm sandy color I'm going for. With that step out of the way, all that's left now is to fix our miniatures in place and add the finishing touches. I removed the minis from the corks, pulled out the brass rods, and then carefully fix each mini in position to their respective bases with CA glue and accelerator. The deep ones are now locked into position with slight variation from each other. To help integrate them more into the base and sell the water effect even further, I carefully applied multiple heavy layers of Vallejo Gloss Varnish with a moist brush over all the water portions. I made sure to make contact with the base of each creature to integrate them more with the water. It's key here to allow each layer of gloss to fully dry before adding the next to get smooth coverage. The heavy gloss application gives reflections like real water, and in the end, I'm happy with the finished product. Even though it started pretty rough and with my wet tissue idea went terribly wrong, but experimentation like this is why I love working on models and miniatures. With that step complete, I then painted the rims of each base with Citadel Abaddon Black and gave each mini a final check. Each data card was then returned into their slot, and then I called these finished. Oh, what a wild ride and experiment these were. As always, if you've watched the video up to this point, thank you. This concludes episode 3 of my Mansions of Madness speed painting series. I experimented in creating water bases again, and also made a huge mess again. But either way, I hope this was entertaining, inspiring, and maybe you found something to try with your own minis. Maybe your experiments will go better than mine, but I'm glad I was able to salvage it in the end. My goal in this series is to highlight approachable ways to have your board game pieces painted without too much stress and effort while still getting nice results to stand out on the tabletop. If you enjoyed the video and want to see what's in store for the next episode, please give us a like and subscribe. I appreciate the support, and it goes a long way to keep this channel going. Stay safe, be nice to each other, build stuff, paint stuff, increase your immersion. I'll see you in the next episode. Here's the deep ones. Increasing immersion! Bye!